We always suspected that a number of Republicans were secretly working against Trump. We were sure that some of those who were recommended to him for government positions during his first term were simply placed there, sent to interfere with Trump. To restore industry, improve our lives, and fight against the influx of illegal immigrants. We didn't have any proof of this, but we had a feeling. Now we do. The person has been found. Let's move on. The leaders of the Republican parties are saving Trump from impeachment instead of Sessions, who chickened out by refusing to participate as Trump's first attorney general, a former Republican senator. And Trump was offered Bill Barr, who had already served as the United States Attorney General once before. And how do you explain it to him? And Trump was in no way connected with the Democrats and their swamps. About Barr and his actions against Trump because he acted against Trump. I'll tell you, but I'll start with the old story about Barr and his lack of involvement in the Washington swamp. Well, before that, maybe a few words about other Republicans. We call it Republican in name only, which means Republican in name only. John McCain, Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, Liz Charles, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell. These are all names that were very close, led the Republican Party in Congress, in the Senate, and public opinion in general. They did everything they could to make our lives worse under Trump. Why? Because then he wouldn't have been reelected at all. Trump was set up and wasn't allowed to cancel it. Obamacare is the work of John McCain. By the way, John McCain started the investigation, so to speak. And it's not just about investigating all the details of Trump's biography. With the aim of discrediting him, he simply hired Fusion GPS, which was later picked up by Hillary Clinton. And he wasn't allowed to build the wall. And during his first 2 years in office, he technically had a Republican Senate and Congress, but they acted as if they were the opposition party. They didn't let him build the wall with Mexico. His relationships with neighbors and partners were constantly undermined by Republicans who spoke quietly. Naturally, don't accept his terms, we'll get rid of him soon. Nevertheless, even in this situation, Trump managed to move mountains. Well, let's get back to Barr. So, during the era of Ronald Reagan, he worked in the so-called Domestic Policy Council, and was close to the president's inner circle, especially to Vice President George Bush Sr. Well, if you remember, he had previously headed the CIA. So at that time, the very same CIA which Bush had previously led was transporting weapons bought with money not authorized by Congress to Nicaragua. From there, drugs were coming in and being sold in the United States. Quite an operation, right? Bringing drugs into the United States from abroad with the help of the CIA, they were being sold. So the money they got was packed into bundles, and every week a bundle with exactly $9 million was dropped from a small plane. Yes, that's how it was. In this movie, even, so to speak, Cruz, that's the actor, Cruz played that very pilot, right? So, the Mena Airport in the state of Arizona, during a noisy flight, this little plane would come in and drop a bundle, a bag, $9 million. It was picked up by people working for the state governor, and at that time, the governor was Bill Clinton. And after taking their share for participating, they would hand the rest of the money over to the feds, who, of course, would take their cut and pass it up to the leadership. Bandits called Contra had already taken their share, so to speak. After skimming off the top at the stop, they would buy weapons and take them to Nicaragua to fight against the Soviet Chinese bandits. By the way, these Sandinistas, these Soviet Chinese bandits, they also brought drugs into the United States and sold them to buy whatever they needed. But you see, people tried to take money from them to seize and divide that money. Events happened in Maine, the airport, what I'm talking about, in Arkansas, which started drawing attention to this region. The airport, the small town nearby, right? The events included the murder of two 17-year-olds. I think they were 17 years old. There were two local guys who saw a bundle falling from a plane, and they went after it. So the following week, on the same day, I think it was Sunday if I'm not mistaken, they went in a small Jeep to check out what that bundle was. They were found already dead, sitting down. I think they were stabbed. I don't remember now if they were shot in the back of the head or had their throats cut, but in any case, both of them were found sitting in the car. They put this car in front of the train, and the train hit it, so to speak. It caught fire, but nevertheless, it burned. But their bodies were found, and an analysis was carried out, a pathological analysis to determine why they died. So, as I already said, they put the car on the tracks and made it look like this. Why do I say they made it look like that? Because all of this is already known. 7 residents of this town told the police that they wanted to testify that the pathologist sent by Bill Clinton was, for some reason, not a local pathologist. They sent him from Arkansas's capital. He lied, saying that the teenagers were drunk, drove onto the tracks themselves, and died in the crash. That, so to speak, with the pathologist whom the parents later brought in. He claimed they were killed first, then placed there. But in any case, these 7 people who wanted to testify, including about some kind of clouds that were coming from the air, they were all killed within 12 hours after filing their statements. Someone local, obviously, most likely Clinton's bandits. And I don't think these are contrabands who, so to speak, would hardly act so openly on the territory of the United States of America. So most likely these were Clinton's people. They shot everyone at point-blank range and vanished. No one was found. Someone was literally, so to speak, driving by in a car. One of those 7 who said they wanted to testify about something there. They just shot the person with a shotgun or at point-blank range, and let's say he was lying in the street. The car left without plates, and no one saw or knows anything. I don't know if they looked for them or not, but they didn't find anyone. Nevertheless, it was decided to move the operation to another location. Governor of the state, Clinton, and a representative of Vice President Bush, who was also a former CIA director, this year he was vice president. They met at night in a bunker right there at the airfield, discussed the details, and the White House representative shook Clinton's hand and said, "Bill, if you ever want to run for president, know that you already have 1 vote." Here is the man who said that. His name was also Bill, and his last name was Barr. Later, he was assigned to Trump, a man who was not involved in anything, in any affairs. A swamp creature, not connected to the Democrats, especially not to the Clintons, not connected to the Clintons at all.
I have urgent news from Alex Jones and James O'Keefe from O'Keefe Media Group about Trump's former Attorney General Bill Barr. This is the man who appeared on Fox News claiming that there was no election interference, that there was nothing there. Everything was fine. We should let these people go. And now we find out that he was secretly working behind the scenes with the district partner. To be continued.
Let me remind you, Fani Willis is the prosecutor in the state of Georgia who prosecuted Trump for allegedly trying to interfere in their state's election. Trump and 18 White House staff members were prosecuted for undermining United States democracy. As a result, Fani was removed from this case for unethical behavior. She paid a fine of, I think, $54,000 for concealing documents related to the case. And so Bill Barr was secretly helping Fani gather fake evidence to prosecute and convict Trump. A good friend and comrade, and never had any connection to Bolotov.
Now, this is the same Bill Barr who refused to investigate election fraud, said that no judge would listen to this garbage. This is the same Attorney General who shut down retired Colonel Tony Schaffer's investigation about the truck that was pre-filled with ballots for Joe Biden from New York to Pennsylvania. Tony Schaffer is the one who realized this on September 9, 2001. Something was happening, and both Clinton and Bush told him not to interfere. Let me show you this video, because I think you'll find it absolutely fascinating, just like I did. Let me play it for you now.
This was kind of one of the first meetings I had about this plan they developed to go after anyone who works for or supports Trump. And this was on September 13, 2021. So at this meeting, it was me, Armstrong, Shermichael, and Bill Barr on the phone, and they were talking about the January 6th committee. They authorized the committee. We kind of started with some names. They also gave a lot of names. Here, we have people like Michael Flynn, Steve Bannon, Rudy Giuliani, Jeffrey Clark, target people, meaning the people they want to focus on more. And there were people like Stuart Rhodes and Enrique Tarrio and Roger Stone. And here I have a quote. It was something like Barr and Cheney want people to pay attention to Roger Stone, Rhodes, and Tarrio, as well as Bannon, and also Kimberly Guilfoyle, who is close to Trump. Armstrong appears on television or on social media or logs into his Twitter or X account and claims that he is a Republican. He is the kind of person who is extremely patriotic. He loves his country and all that. But at the same time, he was meeting with Bill Barr to plan against Trump and against the people involved in the events of January 6th.
Bill Barr is the Attorney General who was supposed to support Trump, but whom Trump fired at the last moment when he realized he was an idiot who wasn't going to investigate all the anomalies in the 2020 election. Hundreds of thousands of ballots were brought into Pennsylvania, victory in state after state after state. In the middle of the night for Biden, a broken toilet in Georgia, the ballot counting in Maricopa County, Arizona, which took almost 3 weeks. Bill Barr covered everything up. Trump said, "Get out of here. You're not doing your job. This is literally your job." We find out that they were making a list for the racketeer influenced and corrupt organizations case. We find out that Bill Barr targeted Roger Stone, Enrique Tarrio, and other people who came on my show, Alex Jones, Nick Fuentes, and others. All of this was a coordinated effort, Rhines, to overthrow Donald Trump. Subtitle editor.
By the way, I had even forgotten that Barr, having all the evidence of election fraud, refused to file a lawsuit and forbade the department, that is, the Department of Justice, from doing the same. Frightened judges refused to take cases from so-called non-government lawyers. And the government, which was supposed to protect the elections, did everything so that Trump, that is, a man not from their swamp, would disappear and never return. What mattered to them was not the country, but their own circle of money and power in their position. So everything seems human, right? Like people like a person, and that's how they act. But for us, those who pay the salaries of these scoundrels, we don't like it.
What we learn from the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, is that the CIA actually asked her not to spread this information about Obama. Don't share these documents without redacting them. It could harm the country. She said, no, Americans deserve the truth. I want to show you more of what she said on this topic because God bless her. We only know this because she found the courage to speak out and share it.
This is where you use the word dangerous. This is where using the intelligence community as a weapon can have such a dangerous result, one that is truly impossible to measure. When we look at the current president of the United States and President Obama, who was dissatisfied with the outcome of the election, and by creating the appearance of a peaceful transfer of power, repeatedly claiming that he is a defender of democracy, and yet the launch of what we now know came from President Obama. There was a hidden mission, essentially to undermine the will of the American people, to create this lie that would challenge the legitimacy of President Trump's election and his fourth three-year term, which ultimately led to a real years-long coup.
A years-long, slow-moving coup in the White House, led by the Democrats but supported by a number of Republicans from the same swamp. Both sides hated Trump because he threatened their earnings, their positions, and their unchecked power.
The champion of democracy, Barack Obama, supports Hillary Clinton behind the scenes. We don't have any inside information about why he did it because it was Hillary Clinton's plan. He just turned out to be the most influential puppet master to carry it out. But in the end, Hillary Clinton was controlling Barack Obama. Barack Obama was not more powerful, and that's why they wanted to put Clinton in office, and that's why he went along with her disastrous plan.
I actually don't agree with that analysis. Stefan, Hillary wasn't more powerful. It's just that Barack was leaving, and that was, as they say, the past, while Hillary was the future for the Democrats. But that doesn't change the essence of it. Soon it will be 200 days since Trump 47 entered the White House. Actually,
he was very successful in his first term, but gained much experience through on-the-job training. What was President Trump doing while he was in his first term? He had a 4-year break. And, you know, when you have life-changing moments like an assassination attempt, I think he came out of it, saying, I have one reason why I'm here right now, and that's to become president, to save this country. I have a 4-year job. He doesn't waste time. Most presidents in 4 years couldn't achieve what President Trump did in his first 200 days, Ashley.
I interrupted Laura, Trump's daughter-in-law. We're fortunate Trump wasn't president in 2020. Maybe he was elected, but he didn't take office. He toughened up. He realized the country was on the brink. He got the chance to make plans, to recruit and train people. And entering the White House for the second time, he moved steadily toward his goals without stopping.
The most successful 200 days of any president in American history. There was an assassination attempt on him where we all witnessed a miracle from God who saved his life live on air instead of his brains being blown out in 4K resolution. And he believes that he is here to do everything he can for the next 4 years. Like, use my body, use my mind, let's work and make America great again. Subtitles.
In the Congress of a number of states, there is a quorum rule. Let's say, for example, there are 100 people in the state Congress, and not everyone is present at every session. But if there are fewer than, say, 60 people, then in some state the session can't take place. In some, it's 70 people. In some, there's no such rule at all. The Democrats have already run away to other states several times so they wouldn't be brought in for a quorum. Here's the Congress building. In Texas, for example, I think you need 60 people and there are 50 Democrats. They ran away from the Texas Congress, mostly to California and Massachusetts. And they're staying there so that the Republicans can't vote to change the district boundaries. By boundaries, I mean the borders of the districts within which people vote for one member of Congress. Democrats. They changed these district boundaries to improve their chances of winning in Congress for the states of America. And the Republicans want to return these boundaries to the way they were before. I'm not saying Republicans are good or Democrats are bad. Both sides do the same thing. It's just that when the Democrats do it, well, okay, what can you do? They won, they have the right. But when the Republicans win, the Democrats try to solve the same problem by any unconstitutional means, let's say. So finally, as they say, they found a way to do it directly, and the Democrats, they try to just wait it out there. They want to wait for some time so that the Republicans accumulate a lot of issues that need to be resolved, and then they would have to reach some kind of compromise with them and be forced to negotiate about something. Naturally, to live in first-class hotels, go to expensive restaurants, and deny yourself nothing
requires
money. That's why the Democrats, as usual, organized a fundraiser for political refugees. They're the political refugees, but here comes the Attorney General of Texas. So he came up with an interesting idea. The Democrats get paid not to vote, but this is about voting. And that's what they were elected for. They were elected to vote, right, for or against certain laws. In other words, some donors pay them so they don't fulfill the duties they swore to carry out. This is called bribery of officials, and those who took this money to not do their job, their duties, are guilty of taking bribes. In other words, they are bribe takers. The Attorney General of Texas demanded that the court freeze all the funds collected for this strike, demonstration, and so on. In addition, to freeze the accounts of all the runaway members of Congress until they return to work. And the court agreed that these were quite legitimate demands. In addition, from this moment on, any dollar received by the runaway Democrats to live outside the state while the session is ongoing and they are supposed to be working is considered a bribe and is subject to punishment under the anti-corruption law. But in addition, for each day that every runaway Democrat does not show up for work, they must pay the state $500 for that day. Each person who left owes $500 daily. Staying away 10 days means paying $5,000. That means they can't use the funds collected by the Attorney General, and they can't use their official funds that are frozen in their accounts. Plus, there's a $500 daily fine. And their office staff can't either.
Receive any money?
From a frozen account. Not for expenses, not even for their own salaries. This is exactly how Trump teaches the world to solve problems using financial leverage. That's how other countries deal with arrogant politicians, by hitting them in the wallet, or in this particular case, with the dollar. Let's figure out the situation. In a democracy, issues are decided by majority vote. Sometimes the Constitution requires a simple majority, meaning half plus one vote. For 100 people, that's 51. For 1,000, it's 501, and so on. Sometimes it's a supermajority, let's say 67 votes out of 100. But nowhere in the Constitution does it say that you can refuse to let an issue be decided just because you don't like the outcome, by simply running away and refusing to show up for the vote. Every time one party is dissatisfied and wants to disrupt the vote, they'll just run away to another state and hide there. Democracy only works if everyone plays fair. That is, whether they win or lose, they still vote. Members of Congress can vote yes, no, or abstain, but they don't have the right to run away. That is, not to solve problems, not to speak out, not to act. Well, maybe not speak out, but you definitely have to vote or be present during the discussion. So they can't run away to prevent a quorum to keep the problem from being solved, because the problem just won't be solved.
The point is to set a standard where elected officials really have to do their job. Imagine this concept. Politicians are held accountable for the duties they were elected to perform. Voters are now getting what they were promised with Trump. This is a new era. Trump's presidency is the embodiment of the principle: promises made, promises kept. Deceptive Democratic defense is over. If elected, you should at least show up.
Of course, we can't help but mention Ukraine and Trump's meeting with Putin. I don't believe such a meeting can take place unless 90% of the agreements on ways to resolve the conflict have already been reached. And I don't think Putin will pull any surprises at the last moment. Most likely it's what they call a blueprint. That is a kind of draft, a sort of template of what they will sign if they agree on the final terms. It already exists.
This morning, Russia is warning that some countries, including China, are making tremendous efforts to prevent the signing of this peace agreement.
We want to end this with a sovereign, independent, self-governing Ukraine and a situation where Putin won't be able to do this a third time with impunity. This is really a dress rehearsal for Taiwan. We had a good conversation. Yesterday I played golf with the president. Saturday marked the 50th day of the term. China is on his mind.
President Trump scheduled peace talks for Friday in Alaska, in the great state of Alaska, with President Putin from Russia, after the announcement that a ceasefire agreement between Russia and Ukraine is near. The details of this deal are still scarce, but we hear that Putin has agreed to Trump's land swap plan. If it includes the Arctic Passage and the lifting of some or all of the energy sanctions that are currently imposed.
Does this mean that a solution has been found? One that would satisfy both Russia and Ukraine? This is probably not what either side would have dreamed of, but it might be a solution. Trump called it a territorial exchange. Catalan, for some reason, includes Russia's right to the northern route, the Arctic Passage, transit, and the lifting of full or partial energy sanctions on Russia and its buyers. Russian energy. Trump seems to have hit a very sensitive spot for the Kremlin by imposing a tariff on Indian goods as punishment for buying Russian oil. Zelensky says it's not about giving up land, but at the same time, I have to be present at the negotiations. Why go to negotiations about exchanging territories if you're already setting conditions that make all these negotiations meaningless? Well, I don't know. Maybe he wants to come and proudly say, I won't give up anything, and then leave. Or maybe he thinks he can persuade Putin to withdraw all troops from Ukraine. I don't know. With what threats or by what means? As a result of World War II, Poland seized German Silesia and part of East Prussia. France took several mountain passes at the headwaters of 3 rivers from Italy. And I think Montigny, I think that's what the plateau is called. Well, there's a valley there, yes. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics took part of East Prussia and Königsberg from Germany, and from Japan, South Sakhalin and the Kuril Islands. In the 19th century, Great Britain seized Hong Kong, France seized Algeria and Tunisia, the United States of America annexed Hawaii, then Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and I think Cuba as well, and Guam. Germany had previously seized Cameroon, Tanzania, Italy, Namibia, Togo, and the communists at one time took back all of Vietnam and half of Korea. Muslims once conquered almost all of Europe. Genghis Khan ruled the largest empire territory in the world. So the entire history of humanity is about the redistribution of land. Another redistribution, the strong taking from the weak, is happening right now here in Eastern Europe, Eastern. Is this good or bad? Of course it's bad. When war and death learn to solve problems without using weapons, that will be the key to the survival of our human race. Because with the development of physical sciences, we can easily blow up the entire planet and make it uninhabitable for many, many, many millennia. Trump teaches problem solving without sticks, stones, swords, spears, and atomic weapons. And this is humanity's only chance to survive, to learn not to reach for weapons. The president of Ukraine, according to our intelligence reports, is working with the parliament, with the Rada, and with the cabinet on approving this territorial exchange. Although he speaks directly.
On the contrary, understanding
that if Ukraine knows how, MERAVILLE, refuses now to accept a ceasefire, which from the point of view of the United States of America would be a normal compromise, then in a year or two it will be completely captured and enslaved by Russia. Ukraine will have to change its constitution. Now, in order to give up some territories, Ukraine will have to change its constitution. Or by refusing negotiations, refusing peace agreements, and losing sponsorship support from America. Well, I would suggest that Ukrainians hold a referendum because, according to my information, 70%, and today, Trump mentioned about 80% of Ukrainians want to exchange ending the war for part of the territory.
Now, President Zelensky needs to get everything necessary because he will need to prepare to sign something, and I think he is working hard on this. You are looking at the territory that was fought over for 3.5 years. Many Russians died, many Ukrainians died. So we are looking at this, but actually trying to get something back, to exchange something, it's difficult. Actually, nothing is simple. It's very difficult, but we will get some of it back. We will get something. We will exchange something. There will be an exchange of territories. The river will be improved a lot for both sides.
Currently, the territorial dispute involves 4 Ukrainian regions shown in red: Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, and the Crimean Peninsula. Now, which areas are planned to be exchanged, we don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But from the American point of view, from the perspective of United States foreign policy, this has almost nothing to do with Ukraine, is only slightly related to Russia, and is entirely about China. The continuation of this war helps no one except China. China is the only country that is winning right now. The United States and Europe have spent hundreds of billions of dollars and resources on this war, and both Ukraine and Russia are losing. They've lost hundreds of thousands together, but China hasn't spent anything. They haven't lost anyone and are getting huge benefits by buying sanctioned Russian oil and gas.
What does it mean to buy sanctioned oil and gas from Russia and Iran? It means they get discounts. In other words, it's cheaper. The discounts can range from $1 to $20 per barrel. The Urals grade, or Ural as they call it, is like our brand.
Putin's investment envoy Kirill Dmitriev warns that a number of countries interested in continuing the conflict will make titanic efforts to disrupt the planned meeting between Putin and Trump. When considering the Ukraine-Russia war, view it through China's perspective. All of this ties back to China. The aim is to better prepare the United States for a future conflict with China. That's why we saw Trump put pressure on Zelensky a few months ago to sign a deal on rare earth minerals. Also, that's why the deal Trump just made with Armenia and Azerbaijan with this new trade corridor is said to cut off the European Union more than Russia. No, first of all, it cuts off China. Look, let's break this down quickly. The Pentagon, they've calculated all of this. The Pentagon is a planning organization. All they do is plan. They have plans for everything. They constantly conduct war games. They study every possible scenario to understand what needs to be done to win a war. In this case, to win a war with China. And every time they do this, we supposedly lose. As far as I understand, the only way to change this is through fighting. It's like an open secret in Washington. Why do you think Washington is so obsessed with Russia? Because they share a 2,600-mile border with China. If war erupted between the United States and China, Russia's chosen side could determine the outcome. It's that simple.
That's interesting information that the Pentagon believes a war with China. Well, no one really doubts that it will happen in some form, will end in victory unless China and Russia unite. That explains why Obama was flirting with Putin, why Biden decided to give Ukraine to Putin. This became the basis of the United States State Department's policy, but Trump decided that he would act differently, not from a position of weakness, but from a position of strength.
Trump wants to improve relations with Russia, work with it, stop pushing it closer to China, and instead distance it from China, while at the same time breaking China's monopoly on rare earth elements.
We have more liquid gold beneath our feet than anyone else. Otherwise, no one else could do it except us. We are in a position to do it. We're switching to electricity, but have little of it, and it's mostly controlled by environmentalists. We'll quickly remove the control. It's called rare earth elements. We have great areas with rare earth elements, but we're not allowed to touch them. Because if we touch it, the world will supposedly end. If we dig like China and others, we have great rare earth elements. Do you know what they are? To make different things, including chips and batteries and so on, we have incredible deposits, but they're all off the market. Because some guy in thick glasses looks at it and says, this is an environmental site. And now we can't develop assets worth trillions of dollars. So we're going to unfreeze a lot of things that are just sitting there.
Everything we can produce at home, we should produce ourselves. Trade with our neighbors, allies, friends, with China politely, amicably, but firmly. Here is our Minister of Defense.
Any attempt by Communist China to conquer Taiwan by force will lead to devastating consequences for the Indo-Pacific region and the world. There's no point in sugarcoating it. The threat posed by China is real and could be imminent.
China has quietly seized, bought, and annexed. I don't know what else he's done there. Rare earth mining all over the world, and he started using it as a weapon.
After Trump took office, Beijing introduced new laws requiring the registration and tracking of all domestic tungsten trade. In fact, it's related to strategic stockpiling and leverage. For many years, China knew what Western leaders forgot. Whoever controls the raw materials controls the outcome. This is the ultimate leverage. But now in Washington, President Trump has returned and declared an economic war in response, a war for industry, for industrial sovereignty. Finally, the United States is fighting back. The end of the war between Russia and Ukraine is just the first small move in this chess game of foreign policy. By the way,
if things with Putin in Alaska go according to plan, Zelensky might be called there as well, but only after he secures enough votes in the Rada to approve the deal. All right, for dessert.
The truth is that President Trump never had anything to do with Russia, and the collusion hoax with Russia was a huge fraud imposed on the American people from the very beginning. And the worst part is that Obama knew this truth, just like all the other corrupt officials involved in this scheme, including ex-CIA Director John Brennan, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, ex-FBI Director James Comey, former Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, and others. The report from Director of National Intelligence Gabbard further confirms what we already knew. There was no collusion, no corruption except on the part of Barack Obama and the intelligence agencies of that time that were used for political purposes. The Russian hoax was an outright lie, fabricated by political operatives of the Democratic Party, approved by then-President Obama, and leaked to the media. To launch a years-long witch hunt against President Trump and his first administration, the president's allies, including his own son, Donald Trump Jr., were viciously slandered as Russian agents, and some even lost their lives because of this malicious lie. The first 2 years of the presidency were overshadowed by this fake distraction, and endless resources, time, and political capital were spent refuting these lies at the highest levels of our government. Now, almost 10 years later, thanks to the declassification of documents by Gabbard, the truth is finally out. And this truth vindicates President Trump, his family, and many of his allies and associates who were slandered. President Trump was right from the very beginning about all of this, and we are grateful that justice can prevail. We now have stronger evidence revealing those who tried to undermine the legitimately elected president and seriously harmed our republic. Thanks to the extra work by CIA Director Redcliffe and Chairman Rick Krofa in recent months. A recently declassified 2020 report prepared by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and declassified by Director of National Intelligence Gabbard found that the intelligence community had no direct information that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted to help elect President Trump in 2016. In fact, Russia was preparing for a Hillary Clinton victory under an unusual directive from Barack Obama. At that time, the intelligence community released implausible data about Russia suggesting the opposite. Why? To sabotage the new president? This is truly one of the greatest political scandals in American history. And reporters from traditional outlets, some of whom are in this room today, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, were absurdly awarded Pulitzer Prizes for their participation in spreading this deception. It's long overdue to strip these journalists of their awards. Spreading political disinformation is not journalism. The Democratic Party and those in the intelligence community who pass along information taken out of context and fake information to promote a false political narrative. I'll now turn it over to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, to elaborate before we take questions.
That's a wonderful conclusion and expertly delivered. The scum, the Democrats and their corrupt henchmen slandered, defiled, deceived, and tricked all of us so that their man would win the presidency.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. At the direction of President Trump and with the support and coordination of House Intelligence Committee Chairman Rick Crawford, today we released a declassified report by the Majority Oversight staff that was prepared in September 2020. The stunning revelations we are releasing today should concern every American. This isn't about Democrats or Republicans. It's about the integrity of our democratic republic and the trust of American voters that their votes will be counted. There is irrefutable evidence of how President Obama and his national security team directed the creation of an intelligence community assessment that they knew was false. They knew it would help create a false narrative. That Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help President Trump win, selling this to the American people as the truth. That is not the case. The report we released today details how they accomplished this. They fabricated conclusions from unreliable sources. They hid evidence and credible information that contradicted their false claims. They violated traditional intelligence community standards and concealed the truth from the American people. By doing this, they conspired to undermine the will of the American people who elected Donald Trump in that November 2016 election. They worked with their partners in the media to promote this lie, ultimately undermining the legitimacy of President Trump and starting a years-long coup against him and his administration.
We are here today because the American people deserve the truth, deserve accountability, and deserve justice.
The records we released on Friday were about the Director of National Intelligence and Senator Chuck Grassley's release on Monday. The Clinton Appendix refers to an appendix from the 2018 Office of Minsk report, the Department of Justice Inspector General, and the House Intelligence Committee Oversight Report released today. They all returned to and confirmed the same report. There was blatant politicization and manipulation by the Obama administration using intelligence with the goal of delegitimizing President Trump even before his inauguration, which ultimately usurped the will of the American people. I am going to review the key findings from the House Intelligence Committee report, which investigated the claims made in the intelligence community assessment commissioned by President Obama and released in January 2017. First, Vladimir Putin's main interest regarding the 2016 election was to undermine confidence in the democratic process in the United States rather than to show a preference for any particular candidate. In fact, this report shows that Putin refrained from leaking compromising material on Hillary Clinton before the election instead. He planned to release it after the election to undermine what Moscow saw as Clinton's inevitable presidency. In the January 2017 intelligence community assessment commissioned by President Obama, John Brennan, who was then the director of the CIA, and the intelligence community deliberately withheld information showing that Putin was keeping the most compromising material he had on Hillary Clinton until her possible and likely victory. The report details the information that Russia and Putin had regarding Hillary Clinton, including possible criminal actions such as secret meetings with several named United States religious organizations, during which State Department officials offered a significant increase in State Department funding in exchange for support for Clinton's presidential campaign. They also had documents that showed favoritism from the State Department towards State Department employees who would support Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. There were high-level emails from the Democratic National Committee that contained evidence of, quote, Hillary's psycho-emotional problems, uncontrollable fits of anger, aggression, and euphoria. That then Secretary of State Clinton was allegedly taking strong tranquilizers daily. At that time, CIA Director Brennan and the intelligence community misinterpreted intelligence and relied on questionable, low-quality sources to create a fabricated false narrative that Putin allegedly had, quote, a clear preference for Trump. Brennan and the intelligence community misled lawmakers by citing the debunked Steele dossier to assess, quote, Russia's plans and intentions, falsely claiming that this dossier had intelligence value, even though he knew it had been discredited. The intelligence community excluded significant information and ignored or selectively quoted reliability that contradicted the key findings of the intelligence community's assessment about Putin's alleged support for Trump. Including this intelligence would have shown that the intelligence community assessment's claim is implausible, if not absurd. The intelligence community assessment omitted information from reliable sources, such as the fact that some Russian intelligence officials, quote, were planning for candidate Hillary Clinton's victory, while others believed that neither Trump nor Clinton would respect Russia's interests. As shown in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence documents we published Friday, several intelligence community assessments released in the months before the November 2016 election concluded that Russia had neither the intention nor the capability to influence the outcome of the United States election. On December 5, 2016, the FBI and Office of the Director of National Intelligence held the first post-election closed meeting with the House Intelligence Committee, where neither agency mentioned any desire by Putin to elect Trump. The presidential daily brief compiled on December 8, 2016 stated that neither Russian nor criminal actors influenced the vote count. This document was withdrawn just hours before publication due to, quote, new instructions. If it had been published, it would have been presented to both President Obama and President-elect Donald Trump. On December 9, 2016, the National Security Council convened to bring together President Obama's top security officials, including CIA Director Brennan, then Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, Susan Rice, and others. Following the secret meeting, an assistant to Director of National Intelligence Clapper emailed the intelligence community with the subject, "The President's Task on Russian Election Interference." He told Office of the Director of National Intelligence leaders to make a new assessment for the president. The House Intelligence Committee report that we released today shows that, quote, unlike regular intelligence community analysis, the intelligence community assessment was a high-profile product ordered by President Obama. This instructed the heads of intelligence community agencies and created an intelligence community assessment limited to just 5 analysts with a single main drafter. This is not what happens in the usual process of creating an intelligence community assessment, which is supposed to reflect the views of the entire intelligence community. The production of this intelligence community assessment was subject to unusual instructions directly from the president and senior political appointees, especially former CIA Director John Brennan. The House Intelligence Committee report also shows how later that same day, December 9, Brennan ordered the publication of a, quote, low-quality reports on Russian activities, which had previously been excluded from publication in earlier assessments because the information was deemed, quote, not up to long-standing publication standards. Some of the information later used in the assessment ordered by Obama, despite objections from experienced CIA officers, was, quote, unclear or from unknown sources. The report from the Intelligence Oversight Committee shows that CIA Director Brennan rejected the opinion of senior CIA officers who challenged the intelligence assessment ordered by Obama, stating, quote, "We have no direct information that Putin wanted Trump to be elected."
Nevertheless, the assessment ordered by Obama was published on January 6, 2017, which explicitly stated, quote, "We assess that Putin and the Russian government sought to help Switzerland."
By boosting President-elect Trump's election chances by discrediting Secretary Clinton and casting her in a worse light than him. End quote. The CIA and FBI, then led by John Brennan and James Comey, expressed high confidence in this conclusion, while the National Security Agency expressed moderate confidence. Nevertheless, as the report released today shows, the intelligence community's assessment does not cite any report where Putin indicated that helping Trump win was the goal. That's right, the opposite. As for the Steele dossier, we now know that one of the original documents the Obama administration used in creating this intelligence assessment in January 2017 was none other than the discredited, unverified Steele dossier. The House Intelligence Committee report states, quote, "Contrary to public statements by then CIA Director Brennan that the dossier was in no way included in this intelligence assessment, the dossier was mentioned in the main text of the intelligence assessment and detailed in a 2-page appendix to the assessment." John Brennan lied and denied using the dossier in the intelligence assessment ordered by President Obama, knowing it was discredited. It was politically motivated, and he ordered senior CIA officials to use it anyway. A Central Intelligence Agency officer told members of the House Intelligence Committee when they were investigating this, quote, "CIA Director John Brennan refused to remove it." When confronted with many flaws in the dossier, he replied, "Yes, but doesn't it sound plausible?" Even the bipartisan report of the Senate Intelligence Committee, published in 2020, criticized the FBI's actions regarding the Steele dossier, noting its completely unverified nature and the deliberate disregard for intelligence community procedures in its use. President Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey, and others, including media allies, deliberately repeated the false narrative from the January 2017 intelligence assessment, with a high degree of confidence as if it were a fact. John Brennan, while serving as CIA director, stated in a memorandum to his agency's staff in December 2016, quote, "There is a strong consensus among us regarding the scale, nature, and intentions of Russian interference in our presidential election." National Broadcasting Company News reported this, confirming that Brennan, along with James Clapper and James Comey, agreed with the CIA's assessment that Russia interfered to help Trump win the presidency. As Director of National Intelligence under Obama, James Clapper was tasked with overseeing the creation of this assessment in January 2017 by President Obama, and he expressed confidence in its findings. In a 2018 interview with the Harvard Gazette, he talked about how he gave Trump the same classified assessment that President Obama received, which included a high degree of confidence that Putin directly ordered the hacking and interference in the election. Clapper then added, "I think the Russians really did influence the results." This is a brief summary of the details you will find in the House Majority Staff report from their investigation of the intelligence community assessment ordered by Obama in January 2017. Which brings us to the same conclusion that we announced when we released our documents on Friday. The consequences of this are far-reaching and concern the integrity of our democratic republic. This is because the outgoing president is taking actions to fabricate intelligence in order to undermine and usurp the will of the American people in that election and to begin a years-long coup against the incoming president of the United States, Donald Trump. Thank you.
I think they will try to put Obama in jail, although they say for show that it's impossible, that they're not even thinking about it. Having Obama in prison would be an amazing lesson to all future politicians that no one is above the law. No one is above the law. No one will escape punishment. That would certainly be great. Well, gentlemen, that's all for today. The video was a bit long, please understand, because I wanted to share Tulsi Gabbard's speech with you, and it was quite lengthy. There is what's called sponsorship. It starts at $4. Why? You can do 4 or more per month. Please go to the description. There's a note, a link, probably, not a discount. Click on it, check it out. Everything is very clear there. Please subscribe. Basically, we need some money for our technical needs, and everything we get from sponsors, we spend it all. It's still not enough, as you understand, but soon I think there will be a lot of good sponsors, and soon everything will be enough.